It's gone 20 minutes past 8 as we kick off this morning, taking a look at what is playing out at the ICJ at The Hague. And yesterday was a day where South Africa had presented the case for genocide against Israel at the International Court of Justice. And we've seen huge interest from right across the entire world in what is playing out in Netherlands at this point in time, and also locally for us as South African. And we've seen so many statements. We've seen so many people talk about proud to be South African, and it has taken South Africa while the world has shown inaction as far as Gaza is concerned. South Africa has taken the lead, and right across the board. And the National Union of Metalworkers of South Africa has also reined in and wishing South Africa well and all the best with the case. And this is the reason why we are talking this morning with NUMSA National Spokesperson Pakamile Shlubi Majola. Pakamile, good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yes, it's been a very, very long time since South Africa has had international spotlight. And yesterday was a day when all eyes were not only on The Hague, but also on South Africa, because South Africa, the legal team, and I must say, just looking at the reaction from right across the entire world, shows that South Africa has got what it takes when it comes to standing up against injustice,
Mm,
when it comes to standing up against
mm,
oppression. And NUMSA obviously wishing South Africa well, the legal team well, for fighting for justice for people of Palestine.
mm. Yes, indeed. I think yesterday was a moment where many South Africans could feel an enormous sense of pride. I personally was watching the proceedings from the time that they began, and I must say, I have never been more excited, never been prouder. It was such a moment of real pride. I think I can't think of a better word than that, because honestly, what South Africa is doing is historic. It is historic. We are right in the midst of a genocide in Gaza. This is not a war. NUMSA's position is that this conflict is not a war, it's a genocide. And we are very, very thankful that the South African government sees it the same way, to the extent where they took a bold decision to lodge an application at the International Court of Justice to demand immediate remedies from the court to stop Israel from continuing with its ethnic cleansing of Palestinian people in Gaza. And if you look at how the legal team put their case together, it was absolutely brilliant. Yes, they did start at sort of framing their argument from the position of what the events that happened in on October 7th, but they made it very clear that this conflict or this situation began way before October 7th. That you're actually dealing with an apartheid state that has been systematically oppressing a particular group of people for decades, and they gave clear examples of the violations of human rights that have taken place in Gaza, specifically within the period from October 7th, and how Israel is trying to justify the ethnic cleansing of an entire nationality of people because of the actions of Hamas.
Yes, and also Pakimele, I think what is impressive is the manner and the way that the legal team actually went about in presenting the case
Mm,
for South Africa. It was straightforward, yet it was simple. It was well understood not only for the judges, but also the entire world,
mm.
considering that this was broadcast right across the entire world. So ordinary people got this message loud and clear.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even my daughter could follow. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and at times she would sort of dip in because I was explaining to her what was happening and what the court case was about. But even she could follow, and that shows you the simplicity, the straightforward nature of how they presented their argument. Sometimes court, especially when you're dealing with the law, it can be very convoluted. It can be very technical. It can be sometimes difficult to understand because of the legalese and the language that is used. But the way the South African team presented an issue which ordinarily, in terms of international law, should have been a complex issue, they broke it down in such simple terms that even a 12-year-old could follow. It was very clear. Um, the manner in which Israel has actually exercised this ethnic cleansing. You had different legal representatives looking at different aspects of the case. I'm thinking now, for example, to the presentation made by Advocate Nugai Toby, whose focus was on genocidal intent and how he created a very clear framework of, first of all, defining what is genocidal intent, and then secondly, explaining how he arrives at the conclusion that the Israeli government has genocidal intent. And he did that by using the words that certain Israeli officials, government officials, have used in terms of how they've described Palestinian people, the dehumanizing language that they've used, the fact that they've called them human animals, the fact that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu quoted the Bible. I think it's the story of Amalek, which basically calls on the mass murder of families and babies and children as retribution for Israeli people. And the fact that the army interpreted the language of officials directly in terms of the actions that they took on the ground. You had members of the military who were dancing and chanting and singing and celebrating how they were massacring innocent women and children, how they, as army officials, were dehumanizing the people in Palestine. They did not recognize, if you watch that video, it was so disturbing. They were even using words like, there's no such thing as innocent bystanders. I'm now loosely translating. It's not exactly the exact wording, but I'm just, translating what we're saying, to sort of demonstrate their level of dehumanization, that they don't see Palestinian people as human, that they see any deaths as justifiable deaths. And this means, babies, women, the elderly. And if you look at how Israel has instituted this relentless bombing campaign on on Palestine, that in and of itself is an act of genocide. 2,000-pound bombs which have been rained on Gaza on a daily basis, which have completely leveled the entire landscape, destroying hospitals, destroying refugee camps, destroying churches. The fact that you've got UN officials who said there is not a single place in Gaza that is safe for anyone. I remember reading reports about Israeli soldiers and their snipers who were shooting at medical staff. There was one particular report of I think it was Dr. Mads, who was talking about how you had Israeli snipers who shot at a healthcare worker while that healthcare worker was trying to look after a newborn baby. So, in terms of international law, Israel has crossed all the lines. There is no justification for them to respond in the manner that they have responded to the attacks that took place on the 7th of October, where they have treated um, basically they've basically made the entire Palestinian population take responsibility for the actions of Hamas. And in terms of international law, that is unlawful, that is immoral, that is wrong, and it is an act of genocide. And I think the South African legal team did an excellent job of presenting that case.
Yes, and also I think looking at the reaction from right across the entire world and from Palestinians in particular. We know what had taken place in Ramallah at Mandela Square yesterday. The South African national anthem being sung in Palestine, South
Mm.
African flags flying in Palestine. And I'm just going to quote one of the tweets that came through from Miriam Barghouti talking about South Africa, saying, South Africa is seriously something else. Protect those representatives. They're up against a genocidal regime. Thank you, South Africa, for refusing to remain idle and neutral to slaughter. Now that speaks volumes, Pakamile.
Oh, absolutely. I think, one thing that has become very clear about what's happening in Palestine is the world is, in a way, becoming more divided in the sense that the propaganda that we've been used to for the last 20, 30 years, where the neo-imperialism, neo-colonialism, and the suffering of the working class has sort of been justified by liberals no longer works. If you want to test a person's commitment to justice, you have to ask them what their position on Palestine is. If that person wavers or gives you wishy-washy answers or tries to justify, Israel's right to exist, then you know you're dealing with a right-winger, a fascist, an authoritarian, an anti-democrat. If you're speaking to someone who recognizes that people of Palestine are oppressed, that they are dispossessed, that they are suffering under an unlawful occupation by a racist apartheid state, then you know you're speaking to a progressive. And I think this is how the world and geopolitics is changing. If you see what's happened, for example, in America, Joe Biden, who, when he came in as president in 2020, this man was celebrated the world over. He was presented as a progressive president, as a man of the people, as somebody who is empathetic, different to Donald Trump. But because of the position that America has taken, and specifically the fact that Joe Biden as president is bending over backwards to protect Israel in their bombing campaign against innocent Palestinians, he is suffering in his own country. The polls are he's performing so badly in the polls in the lead up to the elections that are going to take place in November. He has been called Genocide Joe by the masses in America. There is not a week that goes by without protest action taking place, whether it's from trade unions or civil society or progressive formations in America. Every week they are gathering in protest to try and raise their voices and call for the American government to stop funding Israel. And that already tells you the kind of break and the disconnect that's happening. And it's not just in America, it's happening in the UK with Sunak, it's happening in parts of Europe, where people are saying, not in my name. You are not going to go out and defend Israel and claim that Israel is a victim when we can see that Israel is oppressing people in Palestine. I think the story of Palestine and the suffering of Palestinian people resonates very strongly with oppressed people all over the world. We instantly recognize their suffering as our own suffering. And South Africa is uniquely placed as a country because we actually did experience apartheid. This definition of Israel as an apartheid state exists because of the suffering that Black people in this country, Black people, colored people, Indian people, but more so the suffering was more on the Black majority in this country in terms of the oppressive laws that they came up with to subjugate the population here. That definition exists because of us. And the fact that it was South Africa that went to the ICJ to lead the cause on behalf of the Palestinian people and say, Israel is an apartheid state, Israel is oppressing Palestinian people. As an oppressed people, we recognize what this oppression looks like. We have the moral authority more so than any other country in the world. And I think by us doing that, we have strengthened this case and we have ensured that people take Palestine seriously. And we really hope that the ICJ is going to take note of the arguments that the South African government presented yesterday and give us a decision which is in favor of Palestinian people.
Well, today is going to be another interesting day, and let's just look at how Israel responds. And already, we know possibly some of the response may be playing the victim again, talking about
Mm-hmm.
fighting for its own survival, all of that. The October 7th, what had taken place, So we know that this largely, possibly, this could form part of the submission. But at the end of the day, as also the Justice Minister mentioned, even October 7th does not justify the genocide that has unfolded since. So it's going to be quite an interesting day, Pakamile.
Oh, it is. We can definitely expect Israel to you really the propaganda machinery will be out in full force today. They are going to present themselves as victims. They are going to abuse the Holocaust and this concept of anti-Semitism to justify why they've done what they've done. Many people who have criticized Israel and have been justified in criticizing Israel have been labeled as anti-Semitic by the Israeli government. Shortly after South Africa announced that it was going to drive this campaign at the International Court of Justice, pardon me, the spokesperson for the Israeli government, Mr. Levy, described attacked South Africa and said and used the term blood libel in relation to us, which is a trope. It's an anti-Semitic trope which has been used historically to sort of um, describe people or nations that have unfairly blamed Jews and the Jewish nation for the murder of Jesus Christ. Now, the South African legal team did a brilliant job of separating um, our position as a country on Jews versus Israel. We were very clear. We don't have a problem with Jews. This is not an attack on Jewish people. We have a problem on the apartheid state of Israel. And I think it's very important that we make that distinction because you have organizations like the South African Board of Jewish Deputies, which is frankly a Zionist mouthpiece for apartheid Israel, which has used the same useless justification to try and bully South Africa into silence on this issue. And I love the fact that um, the South Africans for a Free Palestine, South African Jews, sorry, an organization called South African Jews for a Free Palestine responded very strongly to Levy to say that don't you dare abuse the term of what blood libel is and use it to describe South Africa. Us, as South African Jews in South Africa, stand in solidarity with Palestinians. We recognize that Palestinian people are dispossessed, and we reject any attempt by the Israeli government to use the genuine suffering of Jewish people during the Holocaust to justify the mass murder and extinction of innocent Palestinians. So I think it's very important for us to continuously denounce this propaganda because that's exactly what it is. It's just propaganda to justify mass murder. We must continue to stand where we are standing right now, which is the morally correct position, which is to recognize that Palestinians are victims in all of this. Israel is an occupying state. International law does not allow an occupying state to react the way that they have reacted in the situation that they find themselves in. They have all the power. They control Gaza and Palestine completely. They control access to land, access to sea, access to air. They control the water supply. They control the electricity supply. So they don't get to stand on a soapbox and claim that they're victims.
Well, Pakabile, you and I can talk a lot more. I'm sure we can spend the better part of an hour, but unfortunately, time is of the essence. But as always, we thank you. We appreciate you taking time out and talking to us this morning. And I'm sure all eyes will be on The Hague this morning. And at some point in time, we'll touch base again. But for now, take care and thank you for your time again.
Thank you so much. And I think more than anything, we must just continue to be very loud and very noisy as a country. We must continue to defend Palestine and Palestinians. We must continue to be on the right side of history so that at no point, because at some point, the media is going to get tired of the story and the focus is going to shift. But we have a responsibility to keep the focus on the people of Palestine and their suffering until they are free.
Thank you. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
that. Pakamile Shlubi Majola, NUMSA's national spokesperson, with us this morning. We're going to go for a break. We'll be back.